John had just gotten off work. His day had been long, and now he felt like unwinding, mindlessly scrolling through his usual internet forums. Then something caught his eye. A thread had been posted just minutes ago. One boy, two kittens. He hovered his cursor over the title. There were already hundreds of comments. People were angry. Who the hell is this sick freak? Someone recognized that room. We need to find this guy. John frowned. He clicked the link. A shaky video played. The lighting was dim, making the setting hard to make out. A man sat on a bed, hood pulled low over his face, hiding his features. In his hands were two kittens, small and barely old enough to walk. He stroked their fur, letting them settle against him. For a moment, it was almost sweet. Then, without hesitation, he picked up a vacuum seal bag. John's stomach turned. The kittens were placed inside. The zipper slid shut. John sat forward, his pulse picking up. "No, no, no," he muttered under his breath. Then, the man reached for a vacuum hose. The vacuum turned on. The bag collapsed, sealing tight around the tiny creatures. Their small paws clawed uselessly at the plastic, their bodies jerking, twitching, fighting for air. Then, after just a few seconds, they stopped moving. John slammed his laptop shut, his breath ragged, his heart pounded, as if he had been the one suffocating. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring at the blank screen. Then, cautiously, he opened it again. The forum thread had exploded. New messages flooded in every second. "We have to find him. This guy is dangerous. This is how serial killers start." Somebody recognized the room. John swallowed hard, then placed his hands on the keyboard. "I'm in." The online investigation started small, just a few disturbed strangers trying to make sense of what they had seen. But in just a few days, a private Facebook group formed, dedicated entirely to finding the man in the video. Deanna was one of the most active members. A true crime junkie, she had seen some disturbing things online before, but nothing like this. "This guy wants us to find him," she said one night on a video call with John and another investigator named Tim. He posted that video, knowing people would react. "He's getting off on it." John ran a hand down his face. "Yeah, but that's why he's going to slip up. He wants to be seen. We just have to figure out what he wants us to see." They dissected every frame of the video. The bedspread had a distinct pattern. Someone found a similar one on eBay. The cigarette pack on the nightstand was a European brand. A poster in the background appeared to be a travel ad, possibly French. Piece by piece, the clues were coming together. Then, just as they started making progress, a new post appeared in the group. "You're getting warmer." They all froze. John was the first to type. "Who is this?" Another message popped up. "That's cute, but you'll never find me." The group chat went silent. Deanna unmuted herself. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "He's here." For the first time since they had started, a heavy unease settled over the group. They weren't just chasing a ghost. The ghost was watching them. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. He kept posting videos, each one worse than the last. The group grew desperate. At first, it had just been that one video, the one that had sent them all into a spiral of horror and obsession. But then another surfaced, and another. Each time, the man used a different method, as if he was testing himself, seeing what he could get away with. One night, Deanna sat at her desk, clicking through a new thread. Someone had posted a third video. She hesitated before pressing play, her stomach already turning. The same dim lighting, the same shaky camera, the same hands slow and deliberate. But the victim this time, a puppy. She slammed her laptop shut, breathing hard. The phone rang. It was John. Deanna answered, barely able to get a word out before he said, "Did you see it?" She swallowed back the nausea rising in her throat. Yeah. There was a silence between them, the weight of it heavier than any conversation. This guy is escalating, she finally whispered. She rubbed at her eyes, which burned from too many hours of staring at her screen. I just have this feeling. He's not going to stop at animals. John let out a slow exhale. Yeah, I know, he muttered. I sent the police another email this morning. And? John let out a bitter laugh. Same as always. We can't do anything unless a human is involved. Deanna gritted her teeth. Are they serious? What the hell do they think is going to happen next? This is how serial killers start. I know, John said. But they don't care. They won't until it's too late. Deanna gripped the phone tighter. By the time they take this seriously, it'll be too late. And by May 2012, it was. One night, a man named Junlin approached the entrance of an apartment building, checking his phone briefly before stepping inside. The lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of stale cigarettes and lingering food from someone's dinner hours ago. The building was old, not necessarily dirty or anything, just nothing fancy. The man was already waiting for him near the mailboxes. Thin, with carefully tousled blonde hair, light eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His clothes were simple, well-fitted, and his posture was relaxed. Junlin smiled politely. Hey. The man returned the smile, his lips curving up a second too late, like he had to think about it first. Hey. There was a slight awkward pause. Jun had responded to the guy's online ad for a hookup, but this felt a little weird. But Jun shook it off when the man gestured toward the hallway. Come on, it's just up here. Junlin nodded and followed him. The hallway stretched ahead of them, the air growing thicker, warmer, almost stifling. The carpeting was worn, the color dulled from years of footsteps grinding dirt into its fibers. Somewhere behind one of the closed doors, a TV murmured softly. The man walked slightly ahead, leading Junlin past a row of identical apartment doors before stopping at his own. A brief rustling of keys, then the sharp sound of a lock clicking open, then another. The man pushed the door open and stepped aside. Junlin walked in. The door clicked shut behind him. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. It was small, almost eerily empty. A full-size bed covered in white sheets sat pushed into a corner. A simple wooden desk sat against the far wall, a computer still on, its screen glowing faintly. There were no pictures, no decorations, no signs that anyone actually lived there. The air was heavy with the faint scent of cologne, mixed with something artificial, chemical, like cleaning products. Junlin took a slow step inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. Nice place, he said, more out of habit than actual compliment. The man carefully locked the door. He turned back, offering the same soft smile. Yeah, it's home. Make yourself comfortable. Junlin hesitated for just a moment before moving toward the bed, setting his bag down near the desk. As he did, something in the corner of the room caught his eye. A camera, mounted on a tripod, positioned perfectly to face the bed. You record videos? He asked, nodding toward it. The man's eyes flickered toward the camera, his fingers brushing against the lens cap. Yeah, it's kind of my thing. Junlin nodded, but something about the way he said it made his stomach twist slightly. He shifted on his feet. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. The man took slow, deliberate steps toward the camera, adjusting the settings with expert precision. His fingers moved smoothly, like someone who had done this 100 times before. The silence in the room stretched. Junlin shifted slightly, glancing toward the door. He could still leave. But before the thought could fully form, the man turned toward him, his hands steady, his expression unreadable. Then, he moved. It happened fast. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos. A struggle, frantic movements, the sound of the mattress shifting as June was tied up. At some point, an ice pick and a knife appeared in the man's hands. John Lin could not fight back. The man had planned every detail. The struggle slowed, then stopped. The man had slit John Lin's throat and stood over him as he died. Then he hit record on his camera. John Lin lay motionless on the bed. The man stepped back, staring down at his work. His breathing was even, his hands steady. There was no hesitation, no panic, just satisfaction. The camera continued rolling. He reached toward his laptop, pressing play on a song, True Faith by New Order. The synth-heavy beat filled the small space, an eerie contrast to the stillness in the room. Then, carefully, methodically, he began his next task. He retrieved a knife. What happened next was precise, practiced, clinical. He moved the body, adjusting it like a director staging a scene. He posed it for the camera. He cut carefully, separating flesh from bone. There was no rush, no hesitation, only complete, eerie control. The camera captured all of it. After hours of work, he finally stopped. He stepped back, surveying the room, his gaze flicking between the camera and what lay before him. The scene was exactly how he had pictured it. Satisfied, he shut off the camera. The man had planned every detail. The next day, he sat at his laptop, uploading the footage. He titled it something that would guarantee its spread, something that would shock and disturb anyone who saw it. One lunatic, one ice pick. And then, as the internet exploded, as the video made its way across shock sites, forums, and underground chat rooms, he sat back and watched himself become famous. 2 days later, a janitor in Montreal stepped out of an apartment building to begin his usual rounds. The air was crisp, the streets still quiet in the early morning light. He hummed to himself as he wheeled his trash cart toward the dumpsters behind the building. Then, he noticed something strange. A black suitcase sat just a few feet away from the trash bins, slightly tilted, its fabric stretched oddly, bulging in places where it shouldn't be. It looked heavy, overstuffed, like someone had crammed too much inside and then abandoned it. He sighed, assuming it was just another case of a tenant dumping unwanted belongings, old clothes, maybe books or furniture. People left all sorts of things out here. He bent down, grabbing the handle, preparing to drag it toward the bin. It didn't move. His brow furrowed. Whatever was inside was dense. He gave another tug, but something about the way it shifted, uneven and unnatural, sent a chill up his spine. A smell hit him next. Rotten, thick, foul. His grip loosened, and the suitcase thudded back onto the pavement. A bad feeling twisted in his gut. He hesitated for only a second before reaching down and carefully tugging at the zipper. The second it slid open, flies scattered. And then, he stumbled back, gagging, his stomach twisting violently. Inside was a human torso. Hours later, police cordoned off the area, crime scene tape stretching across the back alley. Detectives moved methodically, their faces grim as they examined the horrific discovery. The body had been brutally dismembered, with no head, no limbs. But the horror wasn't over. That same morning, across the city, a package arrived at the Conservative Party of Canada's headquarters. A secretary, expecting routine documents, opened it casually at her desk. She barely had time to process what she was looking at before she screamed. Inside was a severed human foot, wrapped in plastic. Elsewhere, a second package was found, this time at a postal distribution center addressed to the Liberal Party. Inside was a severed human hand. Both packages were covered in smudged, red-streaked writing. At first glance, it almost looked like paint, But as detectives inspected closer, it became clear it wasn't. The messages were scrawled in blood. One of them read, "Roses are red, violets are blue. The police will need dental records to identify you." The city was now in a full-blown panic. The question everyone was asking, who could have done this? Investigators scrambled to identify the victim, knowing that somewhere out there, a murderer was watching the chaos unfold. Their breakthrough came that evening when detectives traced the suitcase back to a nearby apartment building. They canvassed the area, questioning tenants, but nobody had seen or heard anything unusual. Then they checked the building's security footage. The grainy video showed the apartment hallway, empty at first. Then, at 2 a.m., a door swung open. A man stepped out. He struggled to pull the heavy suitcase behind him, dragging it slowly down the hall toward the exit. He left the building alone. And when police ran his face through their system, they had a match. The man in the video was Luka Magnotta. By the time authorities arrived at his apartment, he was already gone. The space was eerily clean. The bed was stripped, the floor wiped down, but traces of blood remained, smears on the mattress, a few red stains near the drain in the bathtub. On the wall, a poster of the movie Casablanca still hung, slightly crooked. His laptop was missing. His suitcase was missing. And Luka Magnotta had vanished. Luka Magnotta boarded a plane under a fake name and fled to Europe. As the aircraft ascended into the sky, leaving Canada behind, he leaned back in his seat, completely at ease. The world was in chaos because of him, and he was about to watch it all unfold from a safe distance. He had planned this moment for years. For most of his life, Luka Magnotta had been desperate to be famous. Not just known, but worshipped. He had spent years trying to manufacture his own celebrity, crafting lie after lie, building a persona that didn't exist. He told people he was a successful model, claiming he had worked in high fashion, strutted down runways, and graced magazine covers. He edited his own Wikipedia page, filling it with exaggerated claims about his career, making himself sound like a rising star. He wasn't. In reality, his modeling gigs were few and far between, small-time, forgettable, unremarkable. His photo shoots were mostly low budget, his name unknown in any real industry. But that didn't stop him from telling anyone who would listen that he was on the verge of superstardom. When the modeling dream failed, he tried another route. He auditioned for reality TV shows, desperate for even a few minutes of screen time. In 2007, he tried out for Cover Guy, a Canadian reality competition for male models. He didn't make it past the first round. The judges told him he lacked the it factor, that he was too awkward. He smiled and nodded, but inside, he burned with rage. They didn't see it. They didn't understand who he was meant to be. If they wouldn't give him fame, he would take it. Luka had an entire network of fake online identities, hundreds of accounts, all dedicated to one thing: himself. He created fan pages about Luka Magnotta, pretending they were run by admirers. He made dozens of fake social media accounts, commenting under different aliases, all praising him. Luka Magnotta is the next big thing. He's so talented, so gorgeous. The industry just doesn't appreciate real beauty. If someone questioned him, he would use another fake account to defend himself. He would argue with people online as different versions of himself, building the illusion that he had an actual fan base. He even planted rumors in forums and gossip sites, claiming he had dated famous women, most notably Karla Homolka, the notorious Canadian killer. The rumor spread like wildfire. For a brief moment, people were talking about him. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. It didn't matter that Homolka denied ever knowing him. For a few weeks, Luka Magnotta's name was circulating in the media, and he loved it. But it wasn't enough. People forgot him. His name faded. his online lies collapsed. No matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried to force the world to notice him, he was invisible. Until now. Now, the entire world knew his name. Not as a model, not as a reality star, not as a glamorous celebrity, but as a monster. And Luka Magnotta loved it. He arrived in Paris and checked into a hotel, paying in cash. He flipped on the television, flipping through news coverage of his own crime. He was everywhere, every station, every website. His face, his name, his video. The world was talking about Luka Magnotta. He sat back on the bed, smiling to himself. They had all ignored him for so long. Now, they would never forget him. Then, his arrogance got in the way, and he made a fatal mistake. Luka Magnotta had been on the run for days, slipping between cheap hotels and internet cafes, living off cash, and avoiding leaving any kind of digital trace that could lead police to him. He moved constantly, never staying in one place too long, watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. From Paris, he had boarded a bus to Berlin, blending into the crowds. Just another traveler moving through the city. He wasn't worried. In fact, he was enjoying himself. Every morning, he would wake up in some new city, sip coffee at a small cafe, and turn on the news, his news. The entire world was hunting him. On June 4th, 2012, Luka walked into an internet cafe in Berlin, just like he had done in the past few days. The place was small, dimly lit, the faint scent of coffee and cigarette smoke lingering in the air. A few other customers sat scattered throughout the room, hunched over their screens, lost in whatever they were watching. Luka walked casually to the counter, ordered a coffee, and handed the cashier a few euros before settling into a computer station in the back. He adjusted the chair, placed his fingers on the keyboard, and opened a web browser. And then, just like he had done every single day since the murder, he Googled himself. From behind the counter, the cafe's owner, Kadir, watched him. The face was familiar. He had seen it somewhere before, recently. He frowned, wiping his hands on his apron, turning his attention toward the TV mounted near the ceiling. It was playing the news, a manhunt, an international fugitive. And then, the image on the screen matched the man sitting just feet away from him. For a moment, Kadir froze. Then, he picked up the phone and called the police emergency line. His voice was barely above a whisper. "He's here." Minutes later, the cafe door burst open. German police swarmed in, their weapons drawn, moving with the kind of precision that comes from chasing someone internationally wanted. Customers jerked their heads up in alarm, a few ducking out of the way as officers stormed toward the back of the cafe. Luka barely reacted. He didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He just sat there, staring at the screen, his fingers still resting on the keyboard. A news article about himself was open in front of him. His own face looked back at him from the monitor. An officer grabbed his arm, yanking him from the chair. Luka smirked, as if this had all been part of the plan, as if this was just another act in his show. His hands were wrenched behind his back, cuffs clamping down around his wrists. And as they led him away, he looked up at them and asked, "How did you find me?" Luka Magnotta wasn't his real name. He had reinvented himself, just like he had tried to manufacture his own celebrity. He had spent years erasing his past, creating new identities, crafting a version of himself that existed only in his mind. He was born Eric Clinton Kirk Newman, an ordinary boy from a small town in Canada. But that name didn't suit the life he wanted, so he erased it. Just like he erased everything that didn't fit into his perfect version of himself. He spent years lying, fabricating stories, and creating fake fan accounts to praise a man who didn't exist. But no one cared. The industry didn't want him. The tabloids ignored him. The world refused to see him. So he made them look. Now, the name Luka Magnotta was known worldwide. His face was plastered across headlines. His crime had been dissected, analyzed, and debated. He had the attention he always craved. Luka Magnotta was extradited back to Canada, where he was charged with first-degree murder, committing an indignity to a body, publishing obscene material, and criminal harassment. His trial was one of the most high-profile in Canadian history, drawing international media coverage. In December 2014, after a lengthy trial and days of deliberation, Luka Magnotta was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. His time in the spotlight was over. He was locked away and soon to be forgotten about. The internet detectives who had spent years trying to stop him, they had been right all along. They saw it coming. They tried to stop it. But by the time anyone listened, it was already too late.